Good morning. This is Dylan Jovine with Behind the Markets. Happy Tuesday. Today is Tuesday, July 1st. And I'm very, very excited because this is our nation's 250th birthday this year coming. So I'm very, very excited about that. That's exciting. I wanted to talk today about President Trump's trade deal with Europe that's really coming into focus and how it affects military spending. EU's António Costa said Antonio Costa is European Council President. He said that Europe's increased military spending really is going to involve buying U.S. arms. And this is really helping the trade deal that is being worked between the United States and Europe. A lot of folks gave President Trump a very hard time about this. Really, he was 100% right. I fully supported the president 1,000% really with this, in the sense that the world is entering a new cycle of geopolitical competition, great power competition. The world's entering a new cycle of war. And unfortunately, with what Russia did in Ukraine, and to a lesser extent Iran, and China both providing both of these countries with arms, the war machine is back on. And it's a big deal, really. I was talking to my daughter about this weekend. She was talking to me about war, and she sounded a little nervous. And I said, look, honey, the idea of increased military spending isn't to start a war. It's to dissuade people from picking a fight with you. And to do that, you really got to be a 7-footer. You got to be a foot taller than everybody else here, at least. So you want to be the biggest, baddest kid on the block. So the idea is what Reagan talked about, peace through strength, or Teddy Roosevelt talked about, walk softly and carry a big stick. When Teddy Roosevelt, who I named my son after, because he's a great American president, lived a great American life, truly. So anyway, it's interesting that NATO's increase in military spending is going to really push through the trade deal. So it's really President Trump trying to get Europe to carry more of its weight, because as I've said many times in these videos, the U.S. military doctrine used to be to fight a two-theater great power war, and it really can no longer be that with China. All resources and everything have to focus on China, and Europe has to handle Russia, and that's just the way it has to be. So we've been talking about this, and the European Council President, António Costa, really confirmed what we've been hearing through our sources and in the grapevine, that the EU is going to be spending, that NATO is going to be spending more money. So they now have agreed to go to 5% of GDP. And I have some facts and figures here on what the current spending, military spending as a percentage of GDP for 2024 for some of these NATO members. So Poland already spends 4%. Estonia spends 3.5%. The United States spends around 3.5% too. Latvia spends about 3%, 3.2%. Greece is about 3.1%. Lithuania, almost 3%. So basically, you see the Eastern European countries, the countries that are closest to Russia's border, they spend the most because they're the most concerned, rightfully so. Also, Greece, with its very troubled history with the Ottoman Empire, spends a good amount too. Lithuania spends about 2.7%. Finland spends about 2.6%. NATO as a whole spends about 2.6%. The UK spends about 2.5%. Northern Macedonia about 2%. Let's see. Germany spends about 2%. Sweden about 2%. France about 2%. Montenegro about 2%. Croatia about 2%. Portugal about 1.5%. Italy 1.5%. Canada less than 2%. Less than 1.5%. Spain, which we've had some issues with, spends a bit over 1%, and it goes on. You have to watch out for military spending. So the question now is, as NATO, as Europe really rearms, where is that money going? Again, the president has pushed these countries to buy U.S. weapons, which is good for us because not only does it give us more customers, our arms manufacturers, but it also allows us to get economies of scale on these weapons, which is a big advantage that China has. With 1.4 billion people, with a population that size, where they produce something, they hit scale very quickly. So this allows us to leverage Europe's population to achieve economies of scale, which reduce the price of production per unit, per every unit that we push out. So this gives us kind of the scale to compete with China. Very shrewd decision by the president to do that. And again, it aligns all of our agencies and us tighter with Europe, which I also am a big fan of. The president was really hard on Europe in the beginning, but you could see now the plan coming into focus, really why he was doing that, what goal that was serving. And it was serving a goal, a very important goal, as far as I see it. Look, I'm happy about this. And most specifically, a lot of the companies that we've been recommending specifically are really the biggest beneficiaries of this spending. As a matter of fact, if you look at Breakthrough Wealth, our portfolio, a big chunk of our Breakthrough Wealth portfolio and the special reports that we've put out really touch on the biggest beneficiaries of this specifically. And we put out a new report recently about basically China's kill list, what they released when President Trump, after he got elected. Very important stuff. And the real reason that Elon Musk went to the Pentagon to look at our war plans for China. So you get an idea now that Silicon Valley, through Elon Musk and through other people like Palmer Luckey, who runs Anduril, and of course the Palantir guys, Peter Thiel and them, that they're really, Silicon Valley has finally, after all that woke nonsense of the past couple of decades, has finally entered the fight, has finally entered the ring, because they understand what we've understood for a long time, which is, whose world do you want to live in? The authoritarian dictatorship regime run by China, or do you want to defend American values for freedom and all these other things, for free expression? Do you believe in the Enlightenment, as our founders believed, that our authority doesn't come from the state, which is how it works in China? It comes from God. So we actually, because it comes from God, we have divine authority. We get to actually choose our leaders. It's an actual fundamental difference in worldviews. Very important to defend that, as I always tell my kids. Anyway, this is a super cycle for defense, and it's going to last a long time. It's a super cycle. Make no mistake about it. Again, the war machine has been turned on, and hopefully it stops anybody from messing with us and keeps the world at peace for a long time as we push a lot of money to these new weapons platforms, many of which are in our Breakthrough Wealth portfolio. Anyway, that's all I have for you. Have a wonderful day.